Today is March 20th, 2026, and we're going to be covering the most recent updates related to the Israel-American war against Iran. Now, last week, around the middle part of last week, the U.S. said that we would be, in conjunction with several other countries, releasing 172 barrels of oil from the strategic reserves, petroleum reserves, to help bring down and stabilize crude prices, which at that time and still right now were hovering right around $100 a barrel. Also on Saturday, the U.S. military bombed the strategic economic asset Kharg Island. It's an island off the coast of Iran, and it's responsible for launching about 90% of the country's oil exports. Military assets were predominantly hit, although Trump reserved the right later on to attack the oil infrastructure on Kharg Island. He didn't do that last Saturday, but he did threaten to do it if Iran retaliated, which they actually did, which we'll get into in a moment. Also, last Saturday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth approved a request from U.S. CENTCOM, responsible for the U.S. presence in the Middle East, for an element of an amphibious ready group and attached MEU, or Marine Expeditionary Unit, to head to the region. And the arrival of the MEU should be there within the next week, the middle of next week. Now, this is going to consist of 2 ships from the Japan-based USS Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group and the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. Marines are already actually in the Middle East supporting the Iran operation, and several more flights of Marines have been moved into the theater over the course of the past week. So the Amphibious Ready Group is a fast response unit to conduct sea-based assaults, humanitarian aid missions, and special operations. The group embarked. Marine Expeditionary Unit includes 2,000 Marines. So the speculation right now is that there's going to be some kind of operation to seize Kharg Island or other islands that are adjacent to the coast of Iran. Also, people are speculating that this could be the start of a larger military buildup by the U.S. to take over the shoreline of Iran itself that borders the Strait of Hormuz in order to force the strait open. So you have 2,000 Marines that are coming from ships that are based in Japan. As of 3:20, as of today, the Pentagon is sending 3 warships and thousands of additional Marines to the Middle East, and the second deployment of Marines to the region in the past week. And this is roughly 2,200 to 2,500 Marines from California-based USS Boxer Amphibious Ready Group and the 11th MEU, and they're heading to CENTCOM. So you have roughly 5,000 Marines headed to this area, allegedly to help open up the Straits of Hormuz, which many experts will touch on that. Many experts, military experts, I'm not one, but many military experts are saying that the opinion is across the board. Some of them are saying that it would be an operation it's an operation that's possible, opening up the straits and escorting the tankers that are holed up in the Straits of Hormuz. It's an operation that's possible, but it would take many months and several thousand more military personnel within the Gulf to support the 2 MEUs that are out there right now. Some are saying that. So on the one hand, you have people saying it's possible. On the other, you have many other experts saying that it's workable, but it would take time. So General Kane of the Joint Chiefs of Staff revealed an operation in the Pentagon news conference Thursday, saying heavily armed A-10 warplanes, which are also called Warthogs, and Apache attack helicopters are flying missions over the strait or off the southern coast of Iran. This military hardware is going to likely be used, particularly the A-10s, to help escort the Marine units while they're clearing any islands that they're clearing, or while the Navy is helping to escort the tankers out of the straits after any operation takes place. So it'll be a combination of air and naval power that'll help clear the straits, obviously, and start the escort operation. Now, a pair of U.S. Navy Independence class LCSs, or littoral combat ships, configured for minesweeping. This was kind of an aside. Have actually left the area near the straits. If you recall, the last time we spoke, there were allegations that Iran was starting to mine the straits, and they did actually mine the straits. Just apparently they just did it a little. We don't know to the extent that they've mined the straits, but the two minesweeping naval craft that were there, the USS Tulsa and USS Santa Barbara, were moved further to the east to Malaysia and Singapore, which there's not been an explanation for it, but you'd think that those assets would be necessary, especially right now with a potential operation like we're seeing shape up take place. The operation could also be just a way of deterrence. Maybe it's unlikely. I don't think that that's the case. I do believe that one or many or several of the islands that are adjacent to Iran will be invaded, and the U.S. will try to hold those islands, and we'll get into some of those islands in a moment. So yesterday, this is further elaboration on the MEU. The U.S. This is according to the journal, but they're saying that the U.S. could use the unit to seize one or more of the islands off the southern coast of Iran to use as leverage or as a base to counter Iranian attacks or commercial shipping, according to former and current U.S. officials. So on the first point there about using the island as leverage, I'm not too sure how that would work. It would definitely choke off one economic lifeline for Iran. There are other ways for them to move their oil. Obviously, on the inland, it wouldn't be as much as obviously if they had the access to Karg Island. But if you did seize that island, it's very likely if the U.S. did do that they would destroy many of the energy assets directly in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, as they've already started to do. And so I'm not too sure how well using Karg Island as leverage would how well that would serve the U.S. interest of opening back up the straits. It may just escalate things more, which we'll see. And then they also made the case that it would be a base to counter Iranian attacks on commercial shipping. And most of these military personnel, they're not going to be sitting ducks. There's going to be air power supporting them, but the idea of having them on this island, this open island, and resupplying them, bringing these big cargo planes in to resupply them, that could prove very difficult and risky. So it's the way I see something like that, it could potentially be a turkey shoot, especially when you consider that many of the projectiles that'll be flying onto Karg Island, if we should invade it and try to hold it, are coming not just from the coastal areas of Iran, but deep inside Iran itself. And so just to touch a little bit on a couple of the islands around Iran that potentially could serve as launching points for these projects that the U.S. is wanting to embark on along with Israel. But Karg Island itself is about 8.5 miles. And just to give you some context there, that's roughly the same size as Peleliu, the island that during World War II that the Americans took over from the Japanese at a very high price. But Karg Island's about 8.5 miles. Kish Island, Karg, by the way, is very far up the strait. Keshem is an island that's closer to the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. And that island, it's a mountainous island. This is where a lot of the underground missile cities are that Iran has. But Keshem is 576 to 587 miles. So that would be a huge endeavor, but that's basically like the cork of the Strait of Hormuz. You would think that this would be where the Trump administration in Israel would want to start. Well, the Trump administration, because Israel's not going to be sending the IDF into the straits. Go figure. But you would think that this would be where, and the first island that they'd want to capture, since it's the one that's further out, the farthest out of the strait. So that's Keshem. Hormuz is another one. It's 16.22 miles, and this is again another rocky island, just like most of Iran. Kish, 91.5 miles. So Kargan, there are a couple of smaller ones, are actually the ideal islands. These are all islands that would be ideal to take, and they're further out than Karg. Karg is like the one that's further up, basically like the armpit of between Iran and Saudi. So going on here, U.S. forces are attempting to reopen the strait, as we talked about, by targeting their ability to threaten the choke point. Its launch sites, production capability, and warehouses of missiles, drones, and sea mines. These are all areas that have been under attack for the past couple of weeks since the war actually started. Now, on Tuesday, the U.S. military dropped 5,000-pound deep penetrating munitions on hardened Iranian sites along the coastlines. So they're basically softening up the coastlines. Another sign that there could be some kind of incursion on the mainland. And instead of destroying Karg's oil infrastructure, the Marines could seize again, this is from the Journal, they could seize the island so the U.S. could use it as leverage to open the straits. And this is from retired General Frank McKenzie, and he was at CENTCOM. He's a former commander at CENTCOM. Now, the idea that we're going to put troops on the ground is something that's been a contentious issue in this discussion for since the war started. There are a lot of people who support Donald Trump who say that, well, we're doing this operation. Hopefully Trump is successful. It's a big gamble, but hey, it's not a war. We went over that before. They don't want to, many of his supporters don't want to call it a war. It's a war. Many of them are, again, moving the goalposts and saying, well, even if it is a war, we don't have boots on the ground. This is just a limited operation. And you have some people, I read this in the Journal the other day, that are saying, well, even if we were to put Marines on the islands surrounding Iran, the ones that we were just talking about, that's technically not them going into Iran. So Trump is not technically putting boots on the ground in support of a war with Iran, which is, of course, just another bald-faced lie. They're obfuscating. It's boots on the ground. It's a war. So I think that that's definitely something important to point out, is how often the goalposts are moving in order to deflect what's obviously happening. So troops will need to be reinforced. That's an important point to recognize, since they're going to be there. We just brought that up. They're going to need to be resupplied and reinforced. And again, the question is, will it be safe for cargo planes to travel that far up the coast of Karg Island if that's the objective? It may not be, but if that's the objective. And going back to the Peleliu example, and maybe it's not the best example, but I try to look for parallels when situations like this unfold. Just like I did in a previous video with Gaza, I say, what's something that's similar to Gaza? Let's look at the size of Gaza and what the IDF is trying to do. Let's look at the idea that there are tunnels underneath Gaza. And you can find examples of this, just like the idea of taking Karg Island in World War II in the Pacific, when U.S. Marines were island hopping and taking the islands one by one against the Japanese. In Peleliu, there were 17,000 to 18,000 U.S. Marines from the 1st Marine Division and initiated for the invasion. And that took place on September 15, 1944. And total American forces involved, including the Army's 81st Infantry Division, brought in later, reached 28,000. It was one of the costliest, with nearly 40% casualties. Very different. I recognize that. And the island some of these islands may not be as fortified as Peleliu was, but Peleliu was only 6 miles, and that's what it took. So you can imagine maybe Karg Island, it wouldn't be that difficult to take. It would be difficult to hold it, but it probably wouldn't be as hard to take it, since it is sort of an economic asset, and there probably aren't too many military resources built up across the island the way Peleliu was. But when we look at something like Keshem, the bigger island that we just talked about, over 500 miles with missile cities underneath, et cetera, and the hardware already there, that's probably going to be worse. That would probably be a worse scenario than Peleliu. So we would have to see. Now, of course, the contradiction comes in with President Trump making a statement yesterday when he was asked about putting troops on the ground, moving military personnel, Marines going over there right now. He said he's not putting troops anywhere. Another bald-faced lie. Secretary Hegseth confirmed the Pentagon, and here's something else that adds on to the problem of the troop movements, but the Pentagon is being asked by Hegseth to, or the Pentagon's asking Congress to approve $200 billion for this war. And the reason this matters is that a request on that scale would likely face stiff opposition in Congress. I'm not thinking that that's going to be from the Democrats, the Republicans. Maybe some of them will definitely dissent from that kind of package, but definitely the Democrats are going to likely vote against it, because I think this is going to be the first domino that we're going to see fall, and it's going to culminate in, more defections, and then you're going to see midterms coming up where Trump is, slated to lose both the House and the Senate. It's just going to continue to snowball as this thing flies out of control. So unless by some miracle, by some luck, he's able to stabilize this situation and get the straits opened again within the next month, then things are going to continue to go downhill, no matter how lucky he may get with any kind of military incursion with our Marines. Now, on the 18th, about 2 days ago, Israel attacked Iran's portion of the world's biggest gas field, and that was on Wednesday, driving up oil prices. This is the first time that they've actually attacked energy infrastructure directly. Israel had done this and driving up oil and gas prices again. Now, the strike on facilities linked to South Pars was designed to cut off an economic pipeline for the IRGC. And it really didn't work. It did succeed in disrupting the markets, though, and that's the bigger issue that we ran into there. And Iran retaliated, as we'll see in a moment. Now, unfortunately, it's unfortunate that the U.S. not only was led into this war by Israel by the nose, but that the administration would allow them to sacrifice the economic security of the U.S. further than it already has been sacrificed and disrupted by allowing them to attack these oil and this gas facility within Iran. Now, the story goes something like Trump didn't know and approve of it. We don't know that. I mean, the Wall Street Journal reported that the administration know. According to officials within the administration, Israel is saying that they acted alone. Trump is saying they acted alone. Who knows what to believe? They all lie. So I'm willing to bet that Iran and Israel, Israel and the U.S. had that coordinated. They knew it was going to happen. It was probably just a little gambit by Trump to see what they would do, see if they would retaliate, and sure enough, they did. Now, Qatar, which controls the other part of the gas field, they condemned the attack and called it a dangerous and irresponsible step amid the current military escalation in the region. Now, Qatar's LNG gas hub, the site of the world's largest LNG plant, was hit on Wednesday after the strike against Iran, and again on Thursday morning local time. So 2 times Qatari LNG assets were hit, and Qatar said Iranian ballistic missiles had caused extensive damage at the Ras Laffan industrial area. Sudden loss of this massive supply node has already forced European and Asian buyers into a bidding war over the world's remaining LNG contracts, or uncontracted LNG cargoes. I bet you right now the EU is wishing that they didn't detach themselves or allow from Russian gas or allow the Nord Stream pipeline 2 to be blown up, right? So they're kind of getting their just desserts right now. Now, President Trump, of course, said he knew nothing about the attack, like we just talked about. And again, he said that he told them not to launch any more ballistic missiles or attack Iran's energy assets anymore. At a meeting with Japan's prime minister yesterday, where he was basically begging her to assist him in the war, like he's been begging all the EU countries over the past week to help assist him in opening up the Straits of Hormuz, which none of the European countries want anything to do with, understandably. I mean, you have to consider that it was like maybe 2 months ago that Trump had actually said publicly about the UK and their military that they weren't supportive and they weren't helpful when we went into Iraq, or if it was Afghanistan back in the early 2000s. Hugely insulting, and now he expects them to help out, and they are now. Britain is starting to help out. I think with I don't know in what capacity, but they are starting to help. And this attack, this tit for tat on energy infrastructure, elicited a response, and in my mind, sort of a capitulation by the Trump administration. He put out a long truth post, and he said that a small section, just briefly quoting here, of let's see, Israel out of anger, was taking place in the Middle East, lashed out violently at a major facility known as South Pars gas field in Iran. A relatively small section of the whole has been hit. The U.S. knew nothing about this particular attack, and the country of Qatar was in no way, shape, or form involved. Unfortunately, Iran did not know this, and that's kind of the key word there, or any of the pertinent facts pertaining to the attack, and unjustifiably and unfairly attacked a portion of Qatar's LNG facility. No more attacks will be made by Israel pertaining to this extremely important and valuable South Pars field unless Iran unwisely decides to attack a very innocent, in this case, Qatar. So this language that he's using, it's almost as if he's just begging them to not do it again. He's asking Israel not to attack again, and he's asking Iran to understand that it was a mistake. They may not have known it was a mistake. So I'm asking that they refrain from any more attacks, and Israel will refrain from any more attacks. So you take that from that what you will. I would argue there's going to be more attacks on their energy infrastructure, especially with the Marines moving in next week. And we'll see. There's going to be more escalatory attacks on the gas infrastructure in Iran and in Qatar and likely Saudi Arabia as well. So many leaders in the EU have called for de-escalation. Again, some of them are assisting very, lightly with just on the diplomatic side. They're assisting the U.S. trying to call for peace. Leaders of Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Netherlands, and Japan issued a joint statement urging an immediate comprehensive moratorium on attacks on civilian infrastructure, including oil and gas installations. They say, jointly, we express our readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the strait. We will take other steps to stabilize energy markets, including working with certain producing nations to increase output. So that's not a commitment by all of them. Again, many of the countries that have committed to assisting Trump in opening up the straits are doing so just on a sort of a case-by-case basis. They're not fully committed, but they are providing some assistance with the effort. They're not providing ships for escorts or anything like that, or helping with some kind of invasion force, but they are, again, a few of them, like Britain, have started to assist the U.S.'s efforts. And then, of course, they've gotten together and they're wanting basically to say, please stop attacking the energy infrastructure because it's hurting us. And so that's where that statement comes from. And so today, and this was actually on the 19th, the U.S. and Israel for the first time actually struck the Bushehr nuclear power plant in Iran in the immediate vicinity of the operating power plant. And this, of course, could have radiation effects if they continue to make attacks like that. So where does this all go from here? I would say, as I've said before, I'm anticipating a ground operation for Karg or any one of those islands that we mentioned earlier by the Marines that are coming in. I'm thinking there's going to be not just these two contingents of Marines going in, roughly the 5,000, but I think there's going to be more deployments as time goes by. And so a lot of this is going to kick into gear at the end of this month and the beginning of next month. You're going to see some form of boots on the ground on these islands or even on the coast of Iran to help neutralize this area and help the ship to start helping shipping go back through. And even if shipping does open back up, there's only going to be very few ships that are going to be able to be escorted by our Navy. And there are many reasons for that. And we'll get into that on the next video. So the other thing I'll add at the end is that the energy infrastructure is likely to continue to be targeted, like we said earlier. So that's it for our short update, and we will be doing one more next week to see where things are at. And if you've liked the video, please indicate that by hitting the like button or subscribing. And apologies for the rush, my phone is about to die.